This meeting is being recorded.
Great. So welcome everyone. Happy to have you on a Wednesday evening. Today we have an exciting session on cultivating curiosity and cultures of care, breeding turnips and beyond with Petra, which I'm very excited to learn about the versions they do at Fruition Seeds and the different plant breeding. So thank you so much. And with that, I'll hand it over to Petra.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you all. And thank you everyone who's live, and also sending love to everyone tuning in after the fact. It is what is time, this linear phenomena, and what are we, but all of these organisms learning and growing together. And yeah, here on our farm, the turnips are rising, the first few popping out of the ground. It's true. And, you know, it's still snowing even as it's raining, and the rainbows are undaunted. So it's thoroughly spring in the Finger Lakes, and sending love from our gardens to yours. And I'd love, if you feel so moved, share your name and your pronouns, where you're hailing from in the chat. I'd also love to hear your favorite sign of spring. And also, if you have a question, you can tuck it in the chat anytime. And so grateful to the farm folks, city folk who will be in the chat and accompanying as we go. So we're going to dive into a lot of different elements of curiosity, of care, of turnip breeding. And the last 15 minutes or so, we'll have a Q&A. So certainly any immediate questions you have in the moment, dive right in, and know that we'll have some spacious time at the end for the long existential questions of our lives, which I'm imagining will continue not only tonight, but this is your cordial invitation to be in touch. And this is just the beginning of the rest of our lives, being in dialogue. So thank you again so much for welcoming me tonight, and just wanting to thank you all for being part of this community. And here I'd love to just step back for a moment and share a childhood experience that I had, along with a quote that is very much, can we pause a moment? Oh, thank you. So yes, along with a quote that is one of my guiding North Stars. So yes, perhaps some of you recognize this plant, and perhaps in this course of the story, you will, if you don't already. So yes, imagine the clambering, the tousling in the branches, the squawks of protest. There were so many. There were 30 or more cedar waxwings, all in the branches, stumbling over each other, gobbling up those sweet, delicious Saskatoon berries. And larger than our kitchen, the surface berry outside our kitchen window was just massive, and it would bloom these beautiful white blossoms in spring. And then every June, hence why they're called June berries, and of course, service berries in Saskatoon, so many lovely names for this lovely being. The waxwings don't need a calendar to know when they are ripe. And neither did my sister and I, and they would arrive as a mesmerizing cloud every day, a synchronous chorus of wings, and they would litter the grass beneath the tree with half-consumed fruit. And I remember seeing mice dart out in broad daylight to consume them. And my sister and I would also be in the branches, surrounded by these birds, eating the berries ourselves. I remember once thinking that I might have blue intestines from how many I was eating, and I couldn't stop no matter how I tried. And so yes, if you haven't eaten a Saskatoon, a June berry, a service berry, imagine a blueberry that tastes like floral applesauce. They are such magic. And that tree is now blooming all around us here in Western New York and the Finger Lakes. And these trees fed me more than I will ever know. And that tree outside our kitchen window grew from a seed. And there are many ways that seeds play profound roles in my life and continue to nourish me in my body and beyond. And this quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer's essay, The Service Berry, is one of my favorite of all time that very much guides our farming and our plant breeding and our living, our loving. And I'm honored to share these words with you as we begin. Perhaps the service berries show us another model, one based upon reciprocity rather than accumulation, where wealth and security come from the quality of our relationships rather than the illusion of self-sufficiency. Without gift relationships with bees and birds, service berries would quickly disappear from the planet, even if they hoarded their abundance, perching atop the wealth ladder. They would not save themselves from the fate of extinction if their partners did not share in that abundance. Hoarding won't save us either. All flourishing is mutual. So yes, after 4 decades of growing gardens, of growing seeds, I strongly suspect that seeds and gardens grow me more than I grow them. And hi, my name is Petra, by the way. Sending love from unceded Haudenosaunee, Onondaga lands here, what some people also call Western New York and the Finger Lakes. And a cordial invitation, if you ever find yourself here, please don't be shy. We'd love to share our farm and share a meal. And yeah, I love seeds, grew up in my father's garden, and long story short, after many years of working on small scale organic seed farms, many out in the Pacific Northwest and even in British Columbia, I returned back to my home of Naples and started Fruition Seeds almost 12 years ago with my partner Matthew here. And just wanting to name, when people ask if we have children, we say yes, and great grandchildren, and you can eat them. And also wanting to name that I would not be here tonight smiling, sharing with you if it weren't for a beautiful community of humans. There's 13 of us here on the farm, and just so naming that this is work that we do as a team, as Fruition, and as a wide community, and you all are part of this community, never doubt, and sending love to the wide networks of care that make it all possible for us all to show up tonight together. So yes, we are starting the cycle again. We're sowing seeds too many to count, and we like it that way because then we get to share that abundance with lots of people, including you. So yes, there are so many ways that we are growing, and wanting to affirm that, this is our 11th growing season. So I like to think of us as an 11th generation farm, not centering our human generations, but centering the tomato and the lettuce and the watermelon generations. And we have 20 acres we're growing on, and there are that entire community of people that are on the farm every day, whether it's in the fields or order fulfillment, community care, and germination testing and website. There is a whole universe going on. And wanting to name too that my personal relationship with seeds has changed profoundly across my lifetime, and certainly in the last decade since Matthew and I founded Fruition. And I am continually blown away by my own audacity. I can't imagine the audacity of starting a seed company in hindsight. And so as I unlearn these realities of white patriarchal Homo sapien supremacy, I'm just in really deep gratitude to be in community with these 400 million year old beings, these seeds, and honored to share a little bit of what we're learning about and growing about with them, with you tonight. So I wanted to give you kind of an overview of a little bit of the diversity that we're cultivating in terms of Fruition's breeding projects before we dive into our turnip extravaganza. So yeah, we love thinking about heirlooms as history, and history happened, but history is also happening. So when Kay Green first a decade ago was the person that put the little seed of a phrase in my mind of heirlooms of tomorrow, it really resonated. So especially because I grew up in my father's garden thinking that watermelons were too long season to grow here in the Finger Lakes, I'm really fond of this watermelon and many other watermelons. I mean, shout out to Cream of Saskatchewan and so many amazing watermelons that have been selected in Canada across the years. But this is our August ambrosia, which is a really short season. They're often ripe that last week of July, certainly in August, even planted the first week of June. And so it just continually sends shivers down my spine to share these seeds with other little people of all ages. That some aren't so little, that think that, yeah, watermelons can't be grown in short seasons. And so yeah, whether it's these Dulcinea carrots that were Valero F dehybridized, Brandy Wise combining heirloom flavor and modern disease resistance. This is another fun unexpected revelations is a baby corn, which PS, if you've never tasted real baby corn, it's unbelievable. And there's 12, 15, 20 baby ears per stalk. And if you miss it at its delicious baby corn stage, it's this beautiful popcorn. And so here I want to pause because you can see there's a lot of diversity in this corn, which is harder to see in the watermelon, harder to see in those carrots, but wanting to lift up that diversity is resilience. And I want to just take us on this little side journey now, where it's just in the last couple of years that I have been learning about eugenics, human eugenics, and its astonishing and rather perilous perils of human perfection and also and stability, uniformity, and what we see in vegetables, plants that we grow. So just backing up, eugenics, good creation is what that means in Latin, and it's by no means new. Plato 400 BC was like, oh yeah, we can make a superior society. I've got some rules. And he got some things right. He also got some things wrong. He was like, how about parents and children don't reproduce? That doesn't sound like a good idea. But he thought that brothers and sisters, if they were high enough pedigree, absolutely could procreate for the betterment of society. So yes, it's a very special thing, this perfection of the human race. And eugenics was coined as a term in 1888 by this fellow here, Sir Francis Galton, who happened to be the cousin of Darwin. And so another British elite in the world who, thought that the world would be better with a few more better British elites. And long story short, his work that was very much piggybacking on Darwin's concepts that Darwin wasn't condoning necessarily, lit a fire. Not so much in England. People didn't give him a whole lot of credit in England, but the US, the United States of America, went way deep into this world. And there's a lot more history to share. And just for this moment, I would love to just lift up that it continued to ramp up, of course, until World War II, when Hitler brought to vivid life the implications of human betterment. And although we know that oppression doesn't end, we know that it evolves. And so eugenics persists in our world, as you can see, both in gene editing in humans and in vegetables, in carceral punishment. There's a lot of ways that we can see eugenics alive and well in our societies and in our plants, right? On the many farms that I grew organic seeds on for many years, we were searching, actively selecting for pretty profound uniformity, even on organic farms, right? On a small scale, because they need to fit in a SKU at a grocery store. And so we are what we eat. And it's been really humbling to see. And as I learn more about these histories of eugenics in people, it tracks exactly with the stability and making of, these modern industrial varieties, so that plants can be grown at scale and shipped, harvested by machine, and that uniformity is profit in capitalism. So we are in quite a box, as are these peppers. And so, we growers, we sow and grow these seeds. And for nearly 1 century, they're basically all we've had access to. So this is a question I ask myself all the time. How do we reimagine ourselves and the worlds we live in? And I think we are what we eat. And so how we are not only designing the plates that we eat, from like, here's the salad and here's the potatoes and here's the baby carrots, like how from in our gardens and beyond in our seeds and beyond in the breeding development and how they're shared. How does that translate out into a wider trajectory of curiosity, of care, resisting domination? And just wanting to name here too, that in the last decade that we've been farming on this land, we've had the hottest season on record and the coldest and the wettest and the driest. And so, yes, we are all on the front lines in different ways of climate change and deepening chaos. And so all the more important that we are doing this work together, and that we are looking at seeds as co-adaptive, brilliant allies to play and help guide and to really mentor us in this. And so here's where I would love to just share this analogy as we move forward, because a lot of our breeding projects moving currently, that certainly the ones we're most excited about, just like that corn had so much diversity in it, we're really compelled by how do we maintain and actually be celebrating this diversity, which, right, is kind of implicit in the entire project. I'm different from my parents. I don't know about you. And there's similarities to be totally sure. And do we think that every generation of brandy wine tomato is similar than the one that preceded it? Every seed is a unique individual. And so just lifting up, for as much as I, might have critiques of the alcohol industry, I do really celebrate that people understand pretty widely that a bottle of wine from a given vineyard, a given year, is going to be different than the year that came before it and the year that came after it. And it's not only that it's different, it's actively celebrated. And this is so exciting to me. And so I'm really interested in how we do this in vegetables, because I'm also interested in how we do this in ourselves. I feel like every 6 weeks, I'm kind of a different person. And certainly every year, every 5, I'm constantly changing and becoming. And so are these plants, every generation, and even within a season. And so we love playing with our food. Let me count the ways. And so take a look. This is another one of our breeding projects. This is a green cone-headed cabbage crossed with a purple cone-headed cabbage. So you can see there's a lot of green and purple in these cone-headed cabbages, and every single one is unique. And sometimes the purples are more violet, sometimes they're more burgundy, and sometimes the greens are more light lime, and sometimes they're more emerald. And so these are the kinds of diversity that remind me of, that Buckminster Fuller quote of, if you want to make an existing paradigm obsolete, just make something even more delicious and irresistible. And so, yeah, with equal parts curiosity, humility, and joy, we co-adapt, breed, and play with our food. And so here I also, yes, you can perhaps see that V1. After Spotlight Mix V1, we have these V's as in versions, as in vintage. So that first, and like the Sauvignon Blanc from a given vineyard 2017, V1 would be, not an equivalent, but an analogous idea. So stay tuned for the V1s and the V2s, and they're constantly iterating, adapting, and just one of the ways that we're exploring this. And so just excited to dive into what this looks like in some of the ways we play with turnips. And here I also want to step back and just name that I feel a little uncomfortable with plant breeding in general, especially models that we, as in me personally, but we in this time have been given. There's a lot of domination in it, and there's a lot of kind of human presupposed centricity in it. And so I just want to take you on this little journey and not judging anyone and trying to not even judge myself, just wanting to share with you some of the other sides, even as I'm sharing the ways that I'm so proud of our work and celebrating it. Of Marigovid's Pucci lands on Turtle Island and has some ideas about what he's discovered. And man goes to the moon and puts a flag on the moon. And do you remember this picture from a few frames back? So with great humility, I want to be sharing that I am learning and unlearning as I go. And it is a great privilege to really try to decenter myself as a plant breeder and be centering these carrots and these watermelons and these beloved 400 million year old mentors that truly are growing me more than I grow them. So yes, let's talk turnips, because how many of you have grown Hakurei turnips and love Hakureis, right? They're so freaking sweet. They are the easiest turnip to clean, and they are so vigorous. And even with relatively not massive, very manageable tops, it is such a phenomenal turnip, right? And they're hybridized. And so they're really challenging to save the seed of and to make any kind of, stable creature like them. And there are some other white turnips in the world, some other white Japanese salad turnips in the world. And so from 2012 to 2019, Fruition, we shared Tokyo Market as our OP salad turnip. And how exciting. It's really not bad, but it's definitely not as creamy. It's definitely more mustardy. It definitely just has a skin that is less easy to clean and more prone to turnip maggots. So it just is it's a less phenomenal creature by all means. And so finally, in fall 2019, and here I want to shout out my beloved partner, Matthew, was like, how about we cross Hakurei with a couple things. First, we crossed it with a white turnip with that Tokyo Market to see if we could cross them and have a white salad turnip that had kind of the best of both worlds, edging more toward Hakurei. And then we also crossed them with another F1 hybrid, Scarlet Queen, which is, there's the Hakurei and there's the Scarlet Queen. So that is both hybrids, and wanting to lift up too that there's some really interesting, diving into the deeper wormholes, there's some very major curtains and in seed in the world, right? But certainly in seed, there's some extensive curtains, and pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And so there's lots of things that we don't know about seeds, and especially hybrid seeds, and how proprietary they are, and the various levels of, patenting and other forms of the ways that humans are protecting intellectual property. So there is a lot of question marks around if CMS, cytoplasmic male sterility, is a part of Hakurai's parentage. And so that's one of the main reasons too that we didn't play with it for many years until we just decided we couldn't handle it anymore. And so then we went and just decided to grow these roots, store them in our cellar over the winter, and plant them out and make the cross and see what happened. And interestingly, so fall 2019, we plant out all the roots, store them in our cellar, and 2020, they are flowering. And here, just wanting to shout out Angus, our phenomenal farm manager, and he's got a great kraut that has a lot of the selections we did not select for in some kraut. And so in the meantime, the ones we did select for, the fruits we did select for, are flowering in one of our high tunnels. And the smell is so heavenly. And if you haven't yet grown turnips for seed, they just have this incredible, like honey hay. The scent of their flowers is nothing like you would expect from a mustard. They're just covered in pollinators, and I love them. So they're all flowering and going to seed. And sure enough, I don't know, CMS aside, we harvested seed from both parents. So like there was something going on both sides. And so we harvested the seed from both crossing that white turnip with the Hakurai crossed with the snow in Tokyo, with the Tokyo market. And then we also saved seed from that Hakurai crossed with the Scarlet Queen. And so then we immediately, because the great thing about turnips, even though they're biennial, you can grow them on an annual cycle because they mature so quickly. So we harvest the seed in late July, early August, and have plenty of time to get a fall crop in. And so that first generation of the Scarlet Queen crossed with Hakurai was doing this. So remember, this is a white turnip crossed with a red-pink turnip, and about 60% of the roots were white, the balance being this beautiful purple, with the flesh being beautiful white, with the purple ones having that, pardon our Instant Pot going off, perhaps you can hear it. Facilitator transparency. So with those purple turnips, you can see that beautiful violet starburst in the center. So beautiful. And of course, the white, the cross between the two white turnips were totally white, but the flavor notably all of those traits moving toward Hakurai, which was really exciting. So we invited lots of people to come to the farm and taste them, because we like to not only do our work, just Matthew and I and the team, but we really want to be bringing in our community and doing this work as a collective. And so it was really exciting to just have people see them in the field and wash and taste and just kind of ooh and ah over them, and all together be like, what do we want? What do we not want? And so from there, we tucked them in a bunch of roots into the cellar, grew them out the next year, which was last year. And here they are flowering. And yeah, we have these also, PS, by the way, perhaps it's obvious, but perhaps it's not. We have enough room on our farm to be isolating these from each other, because they would cross up to a mile. But because of hedgerows and just the way barns are spaced, we're able to grow these concurrently in the same season on our 20 acres. So I also just wanted to lift up in this little aside that one of my favorite things about growing roots for seed is that, look at this turnip. It just boggles my mind that roots are storing all of these carbohydrates, all of this energy for the next generation. And it just brings tears to my eyes every time you can see these golden seed pods so full of beautiful seed. And here is the fleshy turnip, no longer fleshy, utterly eviscerated, hollowed out of all of its energy. It's given everything to that next generation. And yeah, I just love imagining what that looks like in my own life, and just giving thanks for all of our ancestors, human and beyond human, that have made it possible for us to be here today. So yeah, that next season, that second season, we harvested the seed and immediately turned around, and then we had pink turnips as well as purple turnips, as well as white turnips in this next generation, this V2, if you will, version 2, vintage 2. Wow, it was mind-blowing. And again, I would also like to step back and say, I don't have a PhD in plant breeding. I don't even have a college degree at all. And so I have lots of imposter syndrome when I'm talking to any professional plant breeder. And there's lots, but I'm also like, wait a minute, we were doing this for 10,000 years before DNA was even described. Maybe it's okay. We all have our place. So just a shout out to you, whoever you are, PhD or not, whether you've even saved seeds or not. There are so many ways to play. And I mean, and plants are a phenomenal palette. So I'm sure people with PhDs will have very empirical understandings, and I'd love to talk with them about what's going on. And in the meantime, I'm just purely delighted to see what's happening, because it's not only beautiful, it's delicious, and just notably smoother skin. So much selection yet to do, right? But so much diversity that is so incredibly delicious and clearly moving in the directions we hope. So it's interesting. You can also see some of the other angles of the whiteness emerging in some of these roots. And oh yeah, and so that exciting development is also happening in the V2s of the white of the snow in Tokyo. Oh, I don't think I mentioned, we started calling those purple turnips, the purple and white plum in Tokyo. And who knows, now we have to call them plum in Tokyo V2, except now they're pink. What's in a name? But snow in Tokyo is the name, what we call the Hakurai crossed with the Tokyo market. And so yes, as you might expect, those are brilliant white, and just continuing to get consistently more sweet, more creamy, and more smooth skinned. So as I think of what next steps look like, just bringing more people onto the farm and continuing to make these selections in community and helping people. I mean, how much selection, I think the plants know what they're doing. But mostly, I just really want people, humans, to be more actively involved in what food looks like, not only in growing, but not only in saving seeds, but also in actively participating in the curiosity of plant breeding and that possibility of imagining worlds that we haven't yet lived in together. And so, yes, inviting folks to the farm in the spirit of these service berries, knowing that all flourishing is mutual. So there's so much more to share. I feel like this was, just a very rough overview of a delicious proposition for the planet. And just wanting to invite you all to, follow Fruition Seeds on Instagram if you don't already, and come visit us when you're in the Finger Lakes. And we have this thing called a website, fruitionseeds.com, where you'll find these seeds, but just really wanting to spend time now with each other and your questions, and diving into turnips and beyond. How do we imagine worlds that haven't yet become? And I think seeds are a profound invitation.
That was so great, Petra. Thank you so much. Beautiful to hear you speak. Anybody, you're welcome to unmute yourself or put your question in the chat. I definitely have some questions, so maybe I'll start it off, but feel free, anybody can pick up afterwards. I was wondering, okay, when you're growing the turnip, like the turnips, like for seed saving, do you find it better to like to start the turnips later for to store them over winter? Like younger roots are better than starting them, say, in springtime. And uh, yeah, and have you ever tried like starting the turnips, putting them in a cooler, and then planting them back in? Like I just those two questions.
Yeah, I love it. It's a good question. I'm forgetting offhand what the vernalization period for turnip is. For radishes, it's really 10 days, ideally something like 3 weeks. So this is like small salad radishes. Larger, like storage radishes, I imagine are similar vernalization to turnips. So honestly, I'll have to look up John Navazio's great book, The Organic Seed Growers, where I'm going to look that up immediately after this call. So I forget what it is. I always am a little trepidatious to try to shorten those time frames. And also I feel like turnips, at least in our climate, planted in spring, just if they get to a larger, they're so much healthier and happier at a larger state to be better storage in the fall, where in the spring they'll be, there's a lot more pressure with some pests like turnip maggots, and also, they just tend to get more like pithy, bitter, spicy, they're more stressed. And so, we plant in spring just to enjoy them. But for a seed crop, we definitely plant them in early September. And for us, then we'll be harvesting them in October and tucking them in the cellar. And I just feel like it's a great selection then also for just storage. I'd love for them to store longer. So yeah, that's a great question. I don't think, I imagine you could absolutely technically plant them in spring and put them in the cooler for that much longer. But yeah, a great question.
Okay, cool. Do you do anything specific when you're like storing them, or just kind of like your other root crops, or like what do you do for your root crops like in the cellar?
Yeah, so we've done various things over the years. And for these, we do something that our friends at Remembrance Farm, a biodynamic farm not too far from us, does, of just, any big clods of soil we leave in the garden, but otherwise, like, we don't wash them. We cut off their tops within a ½ inch and just put them in bags that have holes in them so that there's some airflow, but it's honestly very, very, very humid. And then put them in a cooler. I'm forgetting offhand what the temp of our cooler is. I think it's around 40. But don't quote me on it. So it's like cool, but not super, super, super cold. And we have different storage for depending on, like, the onions are in a really different place than the roots. And so we keep our carrots, our beets in that context as well. And we check in on them ideally 4 weeks, but certainly every 4 to 6 weeks, we're tuning in and like just giving a good look over and seeing, and removing any roots that are clearly, the bad apples, if you will. But generally we don't have to remove too many.
Okay, cool.
I had a question, but I don't want to, if anybody else has one, feel free to speak up or throw it in the chat. I was curious, when you were talking about crossing the Tokyo market with the purple, and then you saved the seed. Did you save seed from both the white and the purple and mix them together, or did you plant them out separate?
We saved, and actually I'm gonna bring Matthew in over here. Matthew's just on the other side of the kitchen. Matthew, come on over. I just would love for, you are such a huge part of this, and it's not right for me to be like, here's everything.
So on the pigmented cross, the way we typically do it, and we did it here, is when we're crossing, say, a white to a pigmented plant, we would have saved seed off of the Tokyo market or the Hakurai, off of the white turnip, and then you grow those out. We would do them as transplants. So we would just seed super heavy, and any cotyledons that showed pigmentation, we would leave. And any cotyledons that were just straight green, we'd rogue those out. And that's how we knew the cross happened in that F1. And then from there, depending on how much you want to stabilize that pigmentation or increase its dominant expression, you can continue to select that way.
Okay, yeah, cool. That's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify to the others that are on here. If you're growing whites and purples and you let them freely cross, you're going to have some whites crossed with whites and some purples crossed with purples. So by growing out the whites and only keeping the ones that have some purple pigmentation, you know that a cross has happened. Otherwise, you might be planting out just a white cross with a white, and it'll take you an extra couple years to get them really mixed up. So that's obviously like why only in 2 years you've got a whole lot of pinks here as well, because there was actually lots of crossing going on.
Yeah, and in the brassicas, it would be different if you were trying to cross pigments in carrots or something. You wouldn't see it in the cotyledon, but you don't have to grow out a whole bed of turnips. You can grow, thousands of seedlings and just look for the few that did it in a few trays.
Right.
Because you see it right at the cotyledon stage.
Yeah, and I will point out, you guys there's an art to that. It takes a bit of time to develop an eye for that cotyledon is purple and that one's white. And I remember, somebody pointing that out and being like, oh, it took me a long time to be able to see that. Sometimes it's very obvious, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
True.
Reminds me,
Thank
we
you,
should do
Matthew.
that with beets if we wanted to make sure they're crossed. We've been working on a yellow and red beet for a while.
Nice. Can you see that in the cotyledon stage?
I think you can. I'm pretty sure. I'll check. They're just starting. I'll go next time on Friday. I'll see if they're different colors.
I had a question about the cabbage. Is there callibos cabbage in your purple cross? In that purple?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
absolutely.
I thought
Yeah,
so.
totally.
We have
Totally.
we have a big roll of calibos going to seed at our farm this year. So
Amazing. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Calibos is one of my favorite varieties of all time. Yeah, that is totally apparent. The other is Caraflex.
oh, okay, great. Neat. And then I was curious about that watermelon is also something we've been playing with. And I noticed on your website it was you grew that in like a collaboration with Cornell or with
Yes.
So what was that relationship and what's that process like?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it looks like a lot of different things. And I don't know, it's like, I don't know how replicable it is. But beyond just exploring and getting to know everyone you possibly can. For us, it looked like, getting to know Michael Mazurek, who's an organic plant breeder at Cornell. And he was like, oh, hey, you're kind of doing what extension was developed for 150 years ago, and they're not doing it anymore, but you are. Maybe we can be friends. And we were like, yes, we can be friends. So he had made a cross, and here's where Matthew, do you remember the two parents? Sangria. What's the other? Yes, bush sugar baby times sangria.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
And so he'd cross those and had like 40 different parent lines. And so we just, wow, kind of went big and grew out all 40 and then invited a bunch of people to just taste watermelons in the field with us. But I digress. That part I think is more imaginable. It was, it was a very specific, special moment in time where a particular organic plant breeder who happened to be at Cornell happened to meet other people who were really excited and didn't even consider themselves plant breeders, but really cared about regional adaptation and watermelons. And was like, you don't know what you're doing, and that's fine. I'm here to help. Here you are. Is kind of how it went down.
Then I'm wondering about these tasting trials. So for like watermelon, obviously you don't need to dress up the watermelon, but when you're doing the tasting trials of the turnips, like, do you eat them raw? Like, is there a special way that you like taste your turnips, or just curious?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, if I had 1,000 hours in every day and 1,000 of myself, we would taste them in so many different contexts. But I think because they are salad turnips, Japanese salad turnips, they're just delicious raw, and kind of raw as soon as you know, although Japanese, in my understanding, Japanese turnips were really developed to be pickled traditionally. They're so phenomenal raw. And so and especially, I feel like the pickling sometimes like maybe moderates any of that fluctuation, especially in like mustardiness or not. So the raw just is so delicious and just really helps, like, oh my gosh, this is sweet, this is mustardy, this is, and the texture too can be, you know, very much shifted in the pickling, where we're really, I mean, can you taste hakurai on your tongue? Like that crunchiness that is yet so creamy, like that texture, that raw texture is really something we're very actively chasing. Yeah, and then it's so delicate too to then be like, all right, because making those selections in the fall so that people are tasting and seeing, experiencing, but then you don't, if we cut them in the fall, they wouldn't store over the winter. So then making selections in the spring to see who's actually made it through the spring is another level.
Right. Yeah, I love hearing the words that people describe, like especially things that we're a bit unfamiliar with. Like I was doing a lot of rutabaga trials last year and hearing how different people, some would, or even radicchio, people, some call it bitter, some call it sour. And it's always very interesting because on our system, our seed linked, you just like for flavor, you would just write 1 to 5, but I often find like you can also make little comments, and I find the comments can be just as like the qualitative data is just as good as the quantitative. And it's always really interesting to hear what different words people use for the different varieties. And I think with these 3 different varieties, it'll be interesting to hear like if your cross maybe has like the word mustardy more than like the hakurai that we're testing it, or how that compares with our white egg, and kind of just seeing what words come up, or if the creamy, like I'd love to like put out some words for folks to kind of say like these words might be the ones that you're looking for, because I don't think we always know how to describe things we're not used to.
Absolutely, which honestly is part of this project for us. And specifically for me, I love words and how it's really fascinating, you know, speaking like the King's English, like the most dominating language on the planet. And so how do we, like, within this context, nonetheless find our ways beyond these times? So like with the words being seeds, it's this huge opportunity to develop a new vocabulary, and that we have been given tools and we can yet develop new tools. And so I'm really excited simultaneously to be like, yeah, I love these like flavor wheels, these color wheels, you know, of like inviting us to increase. And I think sometimes it can expand our vocabularies. And also it's, you know, another box, even though it's a wheel. And so yeah, it's just a really fun invitation to like see that we have very real limitations in our words, in our vocabularies, in our imaginations, and how do we together kind of break outside them.
Someone commented they like the idea of flavor word prompts. Maybe I'll try to make a
Yes.
wheel or something. That could be
I
fun.
love it. I love it. And maybe we can have an event like this, where like we're all growing these turnips, and then like in August or September or something, we share another Zoom where we are all like showing each other the turnips we grew and actively like tasting them in real time and using this flavor wheel. And like that also has plenty of room for us to add our own words, and just sharing that experience together.
Yeah, I like
And
that.
we're going to be doing an event like that this autumn on our farm, where I'm really excited. We're going to grow the parents. We're growing Hakurai and Scarlet Queen and Tokyo Market, and we're growing each generation of their babies. So, it's like grandparents take on a picnic with the parents, with the grandkids. Both the turnip grandparents and grandchildren and the human grandparents and grandchildren. These are goals I have for September.
That's super cool. That reminds me of another question I was wondering, like, because I love the idea of kind of like selling plants in their plant breeding project where they are, you know what I mean? Like, I think David and I have talked about this, like kind of selling the journey. And I was just wondering, like on your sales, like, do you notice, like, do people shy away from buying your versions, or are people just as happy to buy a version versus more of like, something a bit more like known, I guess, or established? Or do you notice? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. And we definitely see they don't necessarily add, it's hard to say. We sell lots of them. And some more than others. Certainly, I think I don't know that I would be so curious. I don't know how much of these stories of the journey that we're effectively sharing in the soundbite culture that we live in. And so they just see like, what? That is a cone-headed cabbage. That's cool. What? It's purple and green. That's beautiful. And just like that beauty, that's where that Buckminster Fuller quote comes in. Like, and I think Beyonce was like, yes, if there's a revolution, it will be irresistible. Like there's only so many times I can use the word capitalism before people just look the other way. But if I'm like, look at this cabbage, isn't it beautiful? So, so I don't know that it's necessarily like increasing our sales. It's definitely not notably like decreasing. And I think honestly, I think there's the direct relationship is more around the excitement that we have around these stories. And also just a picture is 1,000 words, right? So having really juicy, yummy pictures, in addition to just sharing like the genuine like love and excitement, goes really far. But it's really, I'll be really curious. I think, that I don't know how many of the folks with us currently or listening in later are already familiar with Fruition's kind of storytelling, whether it's getting our weekly emails or on social media or otherwise, like in community with us. And so I think once you're inside our space, you're like, oh yeah, this is exciting. But I'm not sure how much it's really like, I'm a big fan of Seth Godin's Smallest Viable Audience. And what did Margaret Mead say? We're like, yeah, small groups of committed turnip eaters will change the world. I'm pretty sure that's a direct quote. Don't quote me.
Wow. That's great. I guess we're getting close to the end. If anybody else has any last questions, feel free to pipe up.
I saw one, there was a question in here. It was just a comment about planting. They planted turnips and radishes April 9th. The first hickory F1 up April 26th. Radishes are all up. One white egg is just breaking ground now. No snow in Tokyo yet. Is this typical? And I was just going to say April 9th, it was pretty chilly here. We've had a lot of rain. I wouldn't expect them to all pop up really fast. And even depending where you planted in your garden or how deep one went compared to the other, there can be quite a big difference. So I don't know if there is a typical, but what,
Yeah,
I'm
I
curious to know
planted,
what you'd say too.
yeah, I planted ours on March 30th, and I saw them come up last Friday. So, and there was a few of each, like, I could see that each variety was sprouting, but that's quite a long time because March 30th, last Friday, is, I don't know, what is that? The 31st. So that took almost a month. So if you planted on the 9th and it's the 3rd, that's probably typical, I guess. It depends where you are in BC too. Any comments, Petra? Sorry, I just chatted away.
It's remarkably similar to here also. Yeah, which is just really exciting. We can be friends. Let me count the ways.
Feel free to unmute yourself and speak, Sandra. You've got your hand raised.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because as I said, the radishes have all taken off and they're doing great. And I sort of assumed that the radishes were sort of like a pace horse for the turnips. So I was just curious, like, do I start worrying or do I start, give them another 3 weeks and see where it goes? It's just, trying to sort of get a handle on it because I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to make these things work really well.
I definitely wouldn't worry about it too much. Radishes tend to be, I mean, it's certainly not a given that a larger seed will be more vigorous, but in my experience, radishes come up before turnips, certainly with more vigor, and so often more quickly as well. And yeah, like David said, it's, oh my gosh, so many variables, and some springs, they just leap out of the ground. It might take 2.5 weeks, and sometimes shorter depending. But if you're planting in early April, certainly here in the Finger Lakes, yeah, it's like the earliest possible moment. Like the snow has just melted and the soil is freshly like drained enough so you can actually plant, but the soil is cold. And so, yeah, that's going to be the slowest germination of the entire year and the lowest bionutrient availability of the entire year. So it's really not, it's totally to be expected to have that first planting be and take its time.
And one other thing I'll just throw out there, because I think, yeah, we get worried that we're not doing all that we can to make our plants grow. And I always say as a farmer, you have to embrace failure every year. It's going to happen with some things. And there's this quote I remember hearing, the idea of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting different results, but it doesn't really apply to your garden. You can do the same thing twice. It's a different season, it's a different year, it's a different week, and you can expect the same results. You got to try the same thing way more than once or twice when you're gardening to make sure that it's true or not. Yeah. Which is why we do these trials with, there's 300 people in the trials. So we're not relying on one of our mistakes to give us all the data.
I love that so much, especially that definition of insanity paired with gardens. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Someone else is saying they planted March 30th, same as me, but white egg is so much farther ahead.
Which
So,
is definitely different than I've heard from other people. So
yeah, we're all experiencing different things. I love looking at the citizens. We have a little Facebook group where people will kind of give updates, and it's people are always into comments like, oh, yours came up first. Well, actually, this one did better in my garden. So it really shows that like you grow the same thing on different farms and at different locations and you have different results. But even last week we had Heather from Uminami Farms like show some pictures of the rows of turnips she had planted, all the same variety, and there would just be a little section in the farm where it didn't germinate. And it's kind of, yeah, it was kind of drove home to me that, no matter what you do, sometimes it just doesn't work out.
So true. It's so true. Wow, that is so powerful. Just wanting to lift up and celebrate that you all are coordinating and being in community together and asking similar questions, sowing similar seeds, and just leaning into what you're learning and sharing those learnings with each other. It just sends shivers down my spine in the best of ways. It's absolutely incredible.
Great. Well, with that, we're just past 7. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And thank you so much to Petra for giving that great presentation. I think we learned a lot about plant breeding and kind of how everyone can do it, which was really nice. So with that, I'll end the recording. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
I